Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, at www.themetalpit.org, where you can find album reviews, interviews, and live show reviews. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And for some video interviews, video shorts, and audio versions of this podcast, visit our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com at the Metal Pit 666. And if you have any comments, suggestions, questions, email us info@themetalpit.org. My name is Blake, and I am the host. And today, my guests are one of my fellow writers at the Metal Pit, Jason. How are you today, Jason?
I am good, Blake. How are you?
Good. And we have a special guest today, Curtis. Oh, no, I forget how to say your last name already.
Dewar.
Yeah. Curtis Dewar, right?
That's right.
Sorry. I drew a blank there. So tell us, Curtis, about you and what you do related to music.
Sure. I basically run a PR company called C Squared Music. I've been doing C Squared Music for, I think, 3 years approximately. I run it with a woman named Corinne Westbrook, and I have a couple other people that work with me. Mainly they're based in the United States. One person's based in the UK. But we handle PR for Century Media Records. We've done it for Prosthetic Records. We've done it for lots of bands. But the company itself is fairly new, but I've been involved in PR for like 12 years in metal. So yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell.
Okay, and you know Jason and Kim from the website here.
Of course.
Before me, and I'm just meeting you kind of today on here.
Yeah.
Now, Curtis, tell us, I always like to ask people that I don't know this question. What got you into heavy metal? Maybe what band or what album, or who influenced you to listen to heavy metal music?
Okay, this is kind of two parts. So I think the first quote unquote heavy metal song I heard was by Bon Jovi. I think it was Living on a Prayer, if I'm not mistaken, back in, I don't know what year that would have been, 85, 84, I don't know. I would have been like 7 years old, 8 years old, something like that. But the first metal album that I actually bought was the tape version of To Hell with the Devil by Stryper.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my intro to metal, quote unquote, with those two bands.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. I had both of those albums. I had a Bon Jovi album and Stryper.
I never actually owned a Bon Jovi album, I don't think, until like they did the Crossroads Greatest Hits, I think, in 93 or 94, whatever year it was. But I did watch all their videos.
Yes, and Jason loves Bon Jovi, don't you?
Yes. We'll say that because Kay will be listening. So yes, Kay, I love Bon Jovi. Oh no, she hates John Bon Jovi.
She hates Bon Jovi.
No, I hate them. I hate them.
I hate modern day Bon Jovi, if that makes you feel any better, Jason.
Yeah. I didn't even know there was modern day Bon Jovi.
Yeah, he's still around apparently, and he sounded horrible last time I checked. But apparently there's something to do with his voice, so I shouldn't say.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we're going to be discussing Megadeth's fourth studio album, Rust in Peace, released in 1990. And for anybody who might not know, Megadeth, of course, is an American thrash metal band formed in 1983 in Los Angeles by vocalist guitarist Dave Mustaine. And I think everybody knows that Dave Mustaine used to be in Metallica, but was kicked out before they released their debut album. Megadeth released their first album, Killing Is My Business, in 1985. They have released 16 studio albums. Their last album was released in 2022. They have had many lineup changes over the years. When did you guys first discover Megadeth? Let's start with Curtis.
Ooh, so far so good, so what on cassette? I think I was a bit of a late bloomer on that because I don't think I heard them until I was 11 or 12. So I think that album came out in what, 87, I want to say.
And yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and then I found the cassette at a friend's house in 88 or 89. And I thought the album cover looked kind of stupid. I'll be honest, it looks pretty cheesy. But I put it on and I actually liked it. I think it was same day I heard Anthrax's Among the Living. But surprisingly, I really like So Far So Good So What. A lot of people think it's not that great and a weak album of theirs, but I thought it was a fantastic album. And now I've lost track of what the question actually was.
Well, that's when you first heard Megadeth.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was that
there you
one.
go.
That was the question.
Yeah.
And Jason, I know you kind of already did the So Far So Good So What podcast episode, but you
Mhm.
might as well say again, how did you get into Megadeth?
Well, it was my dad actually who got me into Megadeth, and I think I told the story on that podcast. He had gone to see Megadeth and Dio live in Toronto on, I think it must have been early 87, late 86, and I had not yet heard Megadeth at that point, and he returned and praised them and said how awesome they were live and blew Dio away. I remember him saying that. And he became a huge Megadeth fan after that. In fact, he got the cover of Peace Cells on his forearm, tattooed on his forearm. So it was his favorite album of all time. So yeah, through my dad, I discovered Megadeth, and the first album I heard was So Far So Good So What, like Curtis, and it's my favorite Megadeth album, and probably one of my favorite thrash albums of all time. So that's how I discovered Megadeth.
I think you're the only person I've ever heard of that likes Megadeth that has said that that's their favorite album, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you, thank you. I think we're a bit like-minded there, so that's good to hear. I think it's a
Yeah,
completely underappreciated album.
same.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a few years on YouTube, guys. So I first heard Megadeth on the first album, and I probably only got it because I knew he was in Metallica, so I wanted to hear what it sounded like. Probably because I really like Metallica, so that's probably why that happened. And I like So Far So Good So What. It's maybe not my favorite one. Peace Cells is my favorite Megadeth album, but I do like So Far So Good So What is my second favorite Megadeth album. So, but yeah, so I've been listening to him ever at the start, even though I would say that after Risk came out, I stopped listening to them.
Yeah.
So, what about you guys? Do you guys still listen to Megadeth all through
I
the years?
I do. The only thing is that I think, unlike what you said, they've made a lot of great albums since Risk came out. Dystopia wasn't that great. 13 wasn't that great. But the newest one with the title I'm blanking on was phenomenal. It was probably their best in probably 10 or 12 years. Yeah, and Endgame is probably one of their best albums. If you haven't listened to that, go take a listen. That's probably on par with Rust in Peace and So Far So Good So What, in my opinion.
I agree with Curtis wholeheartedly there. I think Dystopia was an okay album, but the latest one was masterful. It was I'm blanking on the name too,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a great album, and
The
I
Sick,
do
the
agree that
Dying, something.
they kind of sound like they go back to the good albums like So Far So Good So What. But yeah, do you have the name of that album, Blake?
The what it was called, The Sick, the
Yeah, The Sick, The Dying, and the Dead.
yeah.
yeah,
Right?
that's
Yeah, yeah.
Way better than the Metallica album that was just released, I have to say.
Yes, absolutely. Though I preferred Hardwired to the previous one, the
I
Dystopia.
agree with that. Hardwired is better than Death Magnetic, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think Death Magnetic and Hardwired are better than 72 Seasons for sure.
yeah.
um okay, well, I guess we can start. Oh, wait, I was going to say something about Rust in Peace. Okay, yes, I said it was his first studio album, released September 24th, 1990 on Capitol Records. The first album to feature Marty Friedman on the guitar and Nick Menza on the drums. And of course, Dave Ellefson is still on bass. Since its release, Rust in Peace has often been named as one of the best thrash records of all time. I guess I already know Jason likes So Far So Good So What better, but would you agree with that statement, Curtis?
Hard to say. I mean, I probably got the nostalgia factor going for So Far So Good So What. So I mean, it's kind of hard to say which one I actually prefer more. But I do think I probably listened to Rust in Peace more over the years than So Far So Good So What, to be honest. It's hard to pick though. Like I said, I mean, that was my first Megadeth album. I don't know what to
Well, I
tell you
know a
on that
lot
one.
of
It's a toss up for me.
yeah.
I can remember prior to it coming out, like waiting for 6 months, like it was Christmas the day for the release day, Like I think it was my most anticipated album of all time. And then I ended up going to HMV and lining up. There was a lineup to get the album the day it was released in 1990, and so excited to take it home. And I think at the time I really, really, really loved it, but I don't think it has the staying power that something like So Far or Peace Sells, um, or even the original, the debut album has. So yeah, good album, but not as good as I remember it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get on to the songs, shall we? We'll
Now,
let
are we talking about the remixed and remastered version at all in this episode, or are we just talking about the original? Out of
I'm just
curiosity.
talking about the original, but you can throw in some comments if you have
Cool,
about
cool.
the remix mastered ones if you want.
Sure, sure.
So we'll start with, of course, the title track, or the title track, the first track, Holy Wars, The Punishment Due. Jason, Jason, would you like to go first?
Sure, I remember getting the vinyl single for this. It was a gatefold release actually, and it had some really cool artwork of Vic and like Vic Rattlehead in a control room. I think he had his finger on the nuke button. I don't remember what the B side was to that, but I just remember absolutely falling in love with that single, and of course the video, which is iconic even to this day. Um, I think it's one of Megadeth's best songs. Of all time. I will say that. Even being even if I don't like the album as much as the early stuff, I still think it's one of Megadeth's best songs. It has that awesome kind of militaristic intro. It's essentially two pieces, with Holy Wars revisiting the experiences of Antrim, and the latter half of it, The Punishment Due, being inspired by actually the Marvel Comics character, the Punisher, who I believe also appeared in an earlier Megadeth song, "Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good." Um, it has that brilliantly inspired, heart-stopping tempo, that shift halfway through the song where it has the like transitions to that almost Arabic interlude, and then the second half of the song is all some incredible soloing back and forth between Mustaine and Friedman. So the video's cool too. I don't get the clip with Mustaine skydiving in it. Kind of took away from the overall theme of the video, which obviously was all about war and religion, and then you had that weird clip of him skydiving. I think he just was really into skydiving at that time or at that moment, and wanted to throw it in there. But yeah, awesome song, lots of great memories again with the video, the single, and one of Megadeth's best tracks.
And Curtis, what do you think of the song?
In hindsight, I don't like it quite as much as Jason does, to be honest. I do think it's a good track. Probably not my favorite on the album anymore. It was at one point. It's kind of weird because I don't think I actually heard Rust in Peace until after Countdown to Extinction, believe it or not. I think I went from So Far So Good to So What to Countdown, and somehow missed Rust in Peace. So I mean, it's kind of like I didn't get quite the full experience that Jason did, like hearing it like back to back to So Far So Good, So What. So, but anyways, yeah, I mean, it's a good song. It's just not quite, doesn't quite have the staying power that the rest of the songs in the album do, in my opinion. So I don't know what else really to say on that.
Okay, and I don't have anything to really add because Jason said anything.
I have just another quick point that just popped into my head. The first two tracks off of So Far So Good, So What, I think the ethos of Holy Wars kind of matches that. So
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, and I think those are my two favorite tracks on So Far So Good, So What. I mean, all the tracks are awesome, but those two, the instrumental and then the song after it, again, I'm blanking, but they have the same similar kind of vibe to that, to Holy Wars. So I think that's what appealed to me about Holy Wars. Coming off of So Far So Good, So What, I was like, damn, this sounds like it could have fit well on that album even.
Okay, then we go on to Hangar 18. Curtis, what do you think of Hangar 18?
Still a classic. Probably one of their catchiest songs to date. I am blanking on what their video consisted of, but I'm pretty sure it had a lot of aliens in it, if I'm not mistaken.
It did.
I remember really liking the video when I saw it for the first time. I haven't seen it in a while, but I think this is probably one of their best tracks of all time, in my opinion. And then they also did the Return to Hangar 2 decades later, I think it was,
Hmm.
as a sequel. Anyways, love this track. I really don't know what else to say about it, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a brilliant song, filled with some incredible fretwork from Mustaine and Friedman. I also love the fact that the bulk of the lyrics and Dave's kind of campy, goofy vocals are at the first half of the song, which allows the second half to be dominated by, all that intense soloing. It reminds me kind of in some ways of the structure of Metallica's One. Of course they're like completely different songs. You can't compare the two, but they share that kind of ethos of letting, the blistering fretwork dominate the last half of the song, which I think works really well. Another cool thing is like this song has a chord progression from Mustaine that he often uses. Like he used it throughout Megadeth's career. Um, uh, Several other songs, I can't recall which songs, but it was originally used on Metallica's Call of Cthulhu, which he had a hand in writing when he very early on in Metallica. Because I think Call of Cthulhu was written when Mustaine obviously was still in the band. So there's a chord structure there that is really kind of similar to other songs that Megadeth have done, and has a Metallica feel to it as well, early Metallica feel, which I love.
And oh, sorry. Yeah, that song is about, I guess, aliens, and I don't know if that about a Air Force base near Dayton, Ohio, but it says mythical building, so I don't know if
Yeah, the video was cool. It was a little lengthy. I feel like the song could have been. It's long like one, and I really enjoyed the length of it, but I like Metallica did with one for the radio single, they shortened it by 2 or 3 minutes, which worked really, really well. I feel like they could have done the same thing with Hangar 18. I think there's a lot of unnecessary parts in it, and if they had you know, reined it in a bit, it could have been a more powerful song. But certainly a really decent song.
okay, then we go to track 3, Take No Prisoners, Jason.
Well, this is Dave Elfison, who's always in the background compared to Mustaine. This was his moment to shine, as I think the bass work is really awesome on the song. Um, I've also, when I was doing some research on the song, I read that many people have said, accomplished bass players, that this is an incredibly hard song to master on bass. So that kind of speaks volumes to Ellison's talents, which, you don't think of when you think of Megadeth. I don't think of, Dave Ellefson as, a masterful bass player. But when you listen to the song, if you really, really listen to the bass lines in this, it's incredible what he's doing. He really holds the song together, and along with Menza's drumming, those two just gel really, really, really well in this song. And I feel like Elvis and Menza were meant to be, and you can hear that on this album, and in particular in this song. And then the transition into the next song, Five Magics, I think is pure genius. I think it ends really well and transitions into Five Magics really, really well.
And Curtis, what do you think?
Jason said pretty much everything on my mind with this one, but I mean, one other comment too is lyrically, I think this song is really good myself. I think it's uh, one of the better, some of the better lyrics that Mustaine did on this album personally. Yeah, I mean, Jason just summed it up perfectly. I mean, not really much else to say on that.
Okay, and I guess this could call this a fun fact, but I guess in John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech, he said the line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." So Mustaine twisted that to say, "Don't ask what you can do for your country, ask what
Mm,
your country can do for you."
hmm. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
He loves playing with history like that. This isn't
Yeah.
the first time, but yeah, that's cool.
Yes, he has a lot of political and religious lyrics
Yes,
throughout.
definitely on this album for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, then we go to Five Magics. Curtis.
Okay, so I have two different opinions on this. So I don't know have you guys heard the remixed and remastered version of this album or no?
I have.
I
Yep.
I have not, but
Okay. Jason, have you heard it?
I have. Yep.
Okay. So this song they kind of butchered. So it It's kind of, this is like a weird song for me. I used to think this was one of the best songs on the album, but the new version just kind of ruined it for me. They just, I don't know. This is a hard one for me just because I used to think that this was a great song, and now it's just like when they did the remix and remastered version, it's just hard for me to even say I really like this song anymore. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Great song with the original version. The later version, eh.
And Jason?
Yeah, I would agree with Curtis there. I'm not a big fan of the second version of the song, but as far as the original version, I think it's definitely the most experimental song on the album. Um, I again, I think it could have been far better if Dave had reined it in a bit and focused on, a more traditional song structure instead of opting for experimentation, because I feel like it's a bit awkward at times. I don't know what it is about the song, but there's a slight awkwardness to it. But the most genius thing about the song is I think how it builds throughout the entire thing, and then there's that huge climax at the end. It definitely keeps me as a listener engaged, even listening to it, 30 years plus. And I want more right I'm always from the first note to the last. It keeps me engaged, and I kind of always wanted more. But yeah, it's something about it is a little awkward. I don't know if it's where that break in it where Dave's like, I master five magics, and that chord progression there, it's a little odd. Um, but it's cool nonetheless. Just different for Megadeth.
Yeah.
And so on the remake or the remaster, they changed the song?
It sounds totally different. Well, not totally different, but they added in some vocal stuff, and it's just bad.
Oh, okay. I'll have to take a listen.
No, you
Yeah,
don't
there's
want to.
like
Trust me,
there's
you don't want to.
the vocals, there's like these different inflections and
Yeah,
emphasis that are weird.
yeah,
Um, I don't know what they were thinking when they do that. Uh, they even changed some of the lyrics. Like I
yeah,
think the original line goes, "Bestow upon me knowledge," and then in the remaster, it's "Bestow upon me magic."
yeah.
Um, I've never read anything about why they decided to change it in the way they did. Um, so yeah, I'd be curious to know from maybe I'll research it a bit more to know what Mustaine was thinking when they did this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think they kind of butchered it with
So is
the
that the only
second
song
version.
that they changed?
There was a
Uh,
few on that album. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know that I only had the CD version of the remix remaster for a while, and it just threw me off this album for so long.
Yeah, Take No Prisoners has a line change in it too. I
That's right.
can't remember what it is, but there's something about Take No Prisoners.
Yeah.
Okay, then we go to Poison Was the Cure. Is this song about heroin? I don't know. Does anybody know? Jason, you want to go first?
I would imagine it is. I don't. The title sounds like it is. If it is, it's probably the lone song on here about addiction. But I think I read somewhere recently that there was some addiction references in this album, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is it. But yeah, as far as the song itself, I think it's has one of the best intros in thrash. The song has a fun, almost whimsical main riff. Um, as far as musically, there's this Mustaine's ascending solo and the ascending chord progression that plays in the background. I feel like are truly what make this song. Without it, it would just be an average song at best. Um, Listening to it in the car yesterday, I was surprised that I don't think that this was one of my when I first heard the album or back in the day when it first came out, it was probably one of the throwaway tracks for me, but it was one of the more interesting songs listening to it yesterday for the first time in a long time. It turned out to be one of the more interesting songs on the album for me. So that says something about that song's particular staying power.
And Curtis, what do you think of this song?
Very interesting comment by Jason because I've always loved this song. I always thought it was the standout track on this album, to be honest. The intro is just amazing. The whole song, I think it's one of the best songs that Megadeth has ever done, just period. I think I've probably listened to this song more times than anything else on this album. Yeah, I mean, it's to me, this is just the standout track. And I mean, I'm just surprised to hear whenever I talk to a Megadeth fan, they're always like, "Oh, Poison Was the Cure was okay," but to me, it's always been a standout. It's just, I don't know, I love it.
Yeah, I don't know what it was about back in the day. Not, probably being
It
my
it's
being
not
my least.
uncommon though, too.
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
people say that to me. They'll be like, "Yeah, weakest track." I'm like, "Are you
But
serious?"
now I
Yeah,
agree. I think it's
yeah.
one of the strongest tracks and perhaps one of Megadeth's strongest tracks ever. So
Okay, then we go to Lucretia. I hope I'm saying that right. Curtis, what do you think of this one?
Again, this is another one I just realized on the remix remaster kind of got butchered, so my memory is kind of getting my like. Anyways, it is a good song. It's pretty hooky, catchy. Lyrically, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I don't think it's the strongest track on the album by any stretch of the imagination, but it's catchy, decent Megadeth song overall. But I mean, I wouldn't call it the highlight of the album, to be honest.
And
yeah,
Jake.
I would say it's another example of a song that displays some masterful fretwork from Mustaine and Freeman, like Hangar 18, where the bulk of the lyrics come in the first half of the song,
Yeah.
followed by a war of fretwork between Dave and Marty in the last half. The song goes out with a big bang, similar to One, as we spoke about with Hangar 18. Freeman, it's interesting here, but Freeman also manages to capture the kind of spooky spirit of the song perfectly with his solo.
Hmm.
And I think his solo works really, really well in the context of the song because it is a spooky song, right? It
It
has that
is.
that weird, creepy kind of crawling, I don't know what it is, vibe about the song. But the solo totally matches that from Friedman. And yeah, I think it's my favorite Friedman solo on the album.
Okay, then we go to Tornado of Souls. Now, I was reading that supposedly this is one of the greatest metal guitar solos of all time, and is also widely considered to be one of the hardest ones to play. And I'd read where Marty said when he finished the solo, Mustaine came into the studio, listened to it once, turned around without saying a word, and shook his hand. And it was at that moment that I felt like I was truly the guitarist for this band, even though he was only on a few albums. But Curtis, what do you think
Yeah.
of Tornado of, or Jason, go first?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's possibly the greatest guitar duel in history of metal. I don't know if there's a clear winner between Mustaine and Friedman because they both kill it.
Yeah,
Many argue that, the point that Friedman is the winner, as there are sentiments out there that his solo on the song is one of the greatest ever recorded in metal. I mean, I think that's going out there a bit, but definitely some incredible, incredible guitar work on this album or the song.
I agree 100%. I mean, the other thing too, it's just a catchy song. I mean, like it consistently comes up as being one of their best tracks for a reason. It's just amazing.
Um, do you think, like Dave Mustaine, of course, he's got an ego.
A
Now, I
little.
don't, but do you think he liked having a guitarist as good as Marty Friedman with him, or do you think he really wanted to be the guy? And is that one of the reasons maybe why he's not in the band, or why he wasn't in the band for very long, or for very many albums? I mean,
I have my own opinions on Dave. I think he respects people, but he also has a different, like he's kind of a dictator, right?
mhm.
So he wants, well, I mean, he's not a dictator. I mean, Megadeth's his baby. He knows what he wants. It's just what it is. So if some people aren't doing it the way that he wants, I mean, it's just the way it is. It would probably be better to call Megadeth just Dave Mustaine project. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think as much as Mustaine has an ego, he's not so egocentric that he can't appreciate that there are talents better than his out there. And I think Marty Friedman was one of those, and I think he respected that. And I think the contribution that Friedman brought to the band, I think Dave Mustaine was a very, very lucky man to get him, particularly for this album.
Yep.
Without him on this album would not be what it was. It might not even exist. So, yeah, I think Dave maybe tucked away his ego for the recording of this album, the writing of this album, and let Friedman shine. And shine he did.
Okay, then we go to a short one here called Dawn Patrol, and I get this was written by Ellefson. Curtis, what do you think of Dawn Patrol?
Pass.
I'm of a different opinion. I mean, it's not obviously my favorite song, but as much as fans really don't seem to get the song, I think it's a cool little. I think it's a cool little piece that fits the overall theme of the album. If we're talking about just the theme of the album, I think it fits well. It's a bit
I can see that.
ominous. It might have worked better as an outro to the album, and perhaps if it had been restructured a bit to exude a bit more atmosphere, instead of just being, the bass line that we know and some vocals from Dave. I think they could have done something. It could have been a nice experimental piece, but if there were added layers. I don't think the placing of it in the album was smart. It definitely should have been the outro to the album. As good as Rust in Peace Polaris is an outro, this just makes more sense to come on the tail end.
It sounds more or less like an instrumental, except for the spoken word part. But
Yeah.
So then we go to the title track, which is the last track, Rust in Peace Polaris. Jason.
Good song. I think it's slightly hampered by too much emphasis on the vocals. Way too many lyrics that detract from the song. I mean, it gave Dave the chance to shine vocally here, as there's just a fuck ton of vocals. But I think it was overdone in that aspect. I also think this is Menza's shining moment on the album. He absolutely is unrelenting and pulverizing. The performance by him on this song, and I think it clearly demonstrates his talents as a drummer. And I think Dave was very, very lucky to have him. But yeah, good song.
And Curtis?
I have to admit, it kind of bored me the most recent time I heard it. I used to love it back in the day, Jason. Just now, it's kind of like, eh. One thing I kind of noticed, just re-listening this album, is in hindsight, it's not as good as I thought it was back in the day, but it's still one of the best albums of all time, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, going back and listening to it now, it's like you kind of go like, to me, this track is like not that interesting, I have to say. You know what I mean? I think they could have cut this off. I think they could have cut off Dawn Patrol, and the album would have been much better. Controversial opinion, but my opinion nonetheless.
Yeah, I could see that. What would have made for a short. I don't know how long. Dawn Patrol's, not very long, but
yeah, like a minute, 2 minutes, something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think without those two songs don't necessarily dictate the album as a whole. So yeah, Dawn Patrol definitely could have come off, for sure.
Okay, well, that's the album. I just have one thing to say about the title of the album, I guess. I guess it was inspired by a bumper sticker that Dave Mustaine saw in a car that said, may all your nuclear weapons rust in peace. So I guess that's where the idea for the album title came
from.
Which they haven't. So he was not prognosticating what eventually would come.
Okay, so that's now, Curtis, did you want to is there any extra songs on that remake that you wanted to talk about or anything, or?
I don't really want to talk about the remake. Well, all I want to really say about the remake or the remix remaster is that it was kind of needless. I think the reason why he did it, if I'm not mistaken, is he couldn't find the original tapes, and he had to reconstruct some stuff. Don't quote me on this because I forgot to look before we got on here, but I think it was something to do with that. But I mean, it would I kind of get why he did it, but at the same time, it didn't really ruin the album, but it kind of butchered a classic. I don't know what Jason's feelings are on this, but it's like kind of unnecessary in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it was a pointless endeavor, apart from the fact that, obviously bands like to remaster these old albums to sound better. I don't know, what do you think about that, the sound of the remaster compared to the original?
I thought it sounded better myself, but then all the vocal stuff that he did, it was just like, why?
I don't get when bands remaster, they don't typically restructure things.
No.
It's just typically, remastering the sound quality of the album. So I would have to imagine, I haven't read anything, but if I were in Dave's mind, maybe there were things he wanted to do, maybe there were some regrets that he had, and he was trying to rectify those regrets with some of those changes. But I mean, why mess with something that's not broken? I
Exactly.
mean, why not take Dawn Patrol off then?
Yeah.
or do something different with it, because that was obviously the biggest contention that listeners had was Dawn Patrol overwhelmingly. So that would have been a really cool thing to do, make Dawn Patrol maybe into a proper song, or, restructure a bit to make it fit a little better. But yeah, what he chose to tamper with was things he really didn't need to.
I agree. And then the thing that kind of bugs me about this whole thing is that they then went on to count out into Extinction, which in hindsight to me is a terrible fucking album.
Oh, horrific.
Yeah. It was great at the time. I thought it was great at the time, but now
I
it's
think
like
we all did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we were all duped by Metallica's Black Album at the time to I don't know. I don't know what the what what our mind frames were back then, but there were a couple of good tracks, but Dave just sounds like an idiot on that album.
Well, yeah, and some of those tracks are like obvious Metallica rip-off, Black Album rip-offs.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this? Like Symphony of Destruction is like, when I listen to it now, I go like, that's not a good song. But back in
No.
the day, I was like, this is great.
That is that's Megadeth's answer to
Enter Sandman.
and there you go. I couldn't even remember the name of the song.
Yeah, and then Sweating Bullets is fucking. I know we're not supposed to be talking about this album, but I mean, Sweating Bullets is terrible too, and it's, anyways.
Oh my God! Now I have it in my head.
It's
Jesus.
awful, and so many people think that's a great song, and I go like, no, it's not. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's.
Well,
cringe.
yes, at the
It's
time,
cringe.
like you said, I like that song too.
Well, yeah, at the time, but now you listen to it in hindsight, you're like, what the hell was I thinking? This is horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's rate this album then out of 10. Let's see. Curtis, you want to go first? What would maybe rate it? I don't know. You want to rate it how you would have back then and maybe how you would now? Maybe?
Well, because of the fact when I heard it, I thought it was one of the greatest albums of all time, and it probably still is. I would have rated it probably 9.9 out of 10 just because of Dawn Patrol, to be honest. I pretty much thought the album was perfect for a really long time, but like I said, listening to it now, I can see a lot of flaws in it. But yeah, I would probably still give it a solid 9.5 out of 10, I would say. But that being said, I also think that this is probably the best out of all the big four albums, in my own opinion. That's going to be controversial, but I'm just going to put it out there. It is probably the best out of the quote unquote classic big four albums, in my opinion.
And Jason, what would you rate it?
Well, I'm going to sum it up first and then rate it, if that's okay.
Yes.
Arguably, it's one of the best technical thrash albums ever produced. I would think that this album, wouldn't. I think I mentioned it before. Would not have turned out the way it did without Friedman, and to a lesser extent Nick Menza. As much as Mustaine is, I think, a gifted musician and songwriter, I think Marty's sophistication and his style, his artful way of approaching things with the guitar, took the thing to an entirely different level. And I think, Mustaine and Friedman, I think I mentioned earlier, complemented each other in a way that hadn't been the case since Peace Sells and Chris Poland. I think, Chris Poland and Mustaine complemented each other very, very well, and Friedman in the same way that Chris Poland did. And you can hear it. I think, Rust in Peace is, I'm not a guitar shredder, but I'm pretty sure it's a shredder's wet dream. And the same can be said for Nick Menza. If you compare, like, Curtis and I are both fans of So Far So Good So What, but if you compare the drumming on Rust in Peace to So Far So Good So What, they're light years apart. Menza was a master behind the kit, where Chuck Baylor basically just dialed it in. I mean, it was just meat and potatoes. He did a good job, but it was nothing like Menza was doing behind the kit. Now, all this said, I think that as much as the addition of Friedman and Menza, served to bring Megadeth to the next level with this album, it's also kind of its downfall, in my opinion. I think the album lacks in soul and vitality. It's too perfect. As an example, again, comparing to So Far So Good So What, I think it's chock full of soul and emotion. Every track exudes it. It's far looser than Rust in Peace. It almost has like a punk-like mentality to it. Rust in Peace has none of this. Every track, though, like super competent, is missing, apart from Dawn Patrol, is missing what made the first three Megadeth albums, I think, so special. And when I'm trying to rate an album, in hindsight, it all comes down to retention. I can spin the first three Megadeth albums endlessly, but I find I can only go back to Rest in Peace every once in a while. And when I do, it's not because I love every single song or that, there's just this feeling to it. It's just really to admire at its technical prowess. It just doesn't have the same replayability and soul as the first three albums. It's a bit too clinical. Um, this album might have been the greatest thrash album of all time if it was a bit looser, maybe with more emphasis on feeling and a bit less focus on technical perfection. I get why they went there. They wanted to show off their skills. Mustaine wanted to show up Metallica. I get why they went there with this, but you know, in hindsight, I think it's what fails the album. And also, I think Mustaine's vocal performance on the album leaves much to be desired. Um, Compared to So Far So Good So What, Peace Sells, and the debut album, his snarl and the piss and venom in his voice, it's gone on this album. And what you get is just a cartoonish version of what he did previously. And and then he with the next album, like we were just talking about earlier, with Countdown to Extinction, he even takes that goofiness to a whole nother level. But I think the goofiness with his vocals started on this album. I think he started getting a bit too experimental with his snarl. He the the pitch of it is just it's like he upped the pitch of his voice and it grates. Like if you listen to the album now, I don't know, man, like he really, really does great. And he sounds like he sounds like a constipated goblin on this album. And it doesn't work for me. So all that said, I would have to give the album back in the day, I would have given it a 10, for the first 2 or 3 years after its release. It's really one of the albums I listened to the most. But now I would have to say, honestly, like a 6.5, I think.
Hey. Well, for me, I was going to give it an 8 out of 10. I know I go back, like you just said, I go back and listen to the first three Megadeth albums before I would listen to this one.
Yeah.
But I'm sure back in the day, I listened to it a lot, but I think I just, like, there's other bands that had albums out this year that I think I just listened to them more. And so it was probably just kind of got set aside. And
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And don't get me wrong, my score, obviously I understand the relevance of this album and its place in metal history. I don't, I don't discount that at all. But for me personally, it just doesn't cut the mustard anymore like it did.
yes. Now, how about seeing them live? Anybody want to talk about seeing them live? How many times or something special
I've
about it?
only seen them once open for Heaven and Hell back in 2007. It was a very short set. Very short set. I think it was like maybe 30 minutes tops, 20 minutes, something like that. I honestly don't remember, but they were pretty good live at that point, but they were obviously past their prime. It wasn't like the 90s or 80s. But good set, pretty short. I think Down open before them. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a spectacular set, but I never saw them when in their prime. So that's all I really have to say about them.
Jason?
The first time I saw Megadeth, I've seen them 3 times, but the first 2 times I saw them was in 1990. So the first time was on Clash of the Titans tour with Slayer, Anthrax, and Alice in Chains. And I just remember being underwhelmed. And then the
You
second
were
time I saw
underwhelmed
them,
by classic Megadeth. Wow.
yeah, yeah, it's and the second time I saw them was on they opened for Judas Priest on the Painkiller tour, and I saw that one in Toronto at Maple Leaf Gardens, and again I was underwhelmed. Um, when I compare one of my Megadeth live performances to one of my favorite live performances of all time, which was Metallica on And Justice for All tour in '89 in Hamilton, they don't even compare. Like Megadeth is a far cry from the spectacle that Metallica put on. And I saw them, I think on the same tour you mentioned, Curtis. I saw them in London with Heaven and Hell, and again I was underwhelmed. So I've never seen Megadeth and been overwhelmed, which is unfortunate.
Interesting.
And I don't know what it is. I don't think they have their stage presence is lacking. They don't have the energy.
I was thinking it was like Dave's vocals always kind of sound like a chipmunk live.
Yeah, I think it does come back a lot to the vocals
Yeah.
and his presence as a frontman.
Mhm.
Um, he just stands there and he's got his big goofy hair in front of his face and he doesn't really do anything. When you compare that to Metallica, there's just an energy they exude. I haven't seen Metallica in years, but when I saw Metallica in '89, unbelievable, like the energy that they projected to the audience and the audience, the fans projecting it back. It was just fucking incredible. But you don't get the same thing with Megadeth, or at least I haven't. So yeah, 3 times I've seen.
Okay, I think I have, as you're talking about it, I think I did see them play once, but I can't remember who they played for. I just remember Dave Mustaine was having guitar problems and stuff, so he looked like he was getting pissed off, so it wasn't a good show.
Yeah, well, he tends to do
Having
that. He
technical issues.
Yeah, he tends to get a bit butthurt, which when things like that go wrong. But when you compare that to the professionalism of a band like Metallica or Testament or Slayer or any of the big four that I've seen multiple times live, you never see that. But when you see Megadeth, it's like Dave always seems to have a problem. And I recall that in 1990 he did have problems too, and he just lets that be. He shows that, and I think in some regard fans pick up on that, and I think it impacts the performance. It impacts the fans getting into it wholeheartedly, and I just think it lacks a sort of they lack us. He lacks a bit of professionalism in that regard.
Okay, so now we're going to do our top 10 albums of 1990. And I'm going to go first here. I am interested in Jason's list because as I was looking through the releases, I saw some bands that
Did
Jason
Faith No
might
More
have.
release an album in '90?
Pardon? Did Faith? No, they did not. Or it
Okay.
would be number one, probably.
I thought you said the '90s. I had a '90s list prepared. Oh my god, I'm gonna be.
Well, you might hear your top 10 on our two list, possibly.
No, just 1990, right? That's what this is,
Just,
Blake?
yeah, just
Yeah,
the year.
I had
Yeah.
'90s. I'm sorry, guys. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, you can do what you want. but
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
I'm looking right now. Just
Okay.
I'll have it ready. Just don't worry.
Okay, so I'm gonna start now. Unfortunately, some people might not like this, but I have a hair metal band as my number 10.
Oh God. And stop podcast. Unless
I
it's
have
something Kay
extremes.
approves
I have
of.
Extremes album Pornography.
That's a great album.
Okay, well there, I don't feel so bad.
That's a great album.
Why do you like it, Blake?
Well, I think I just love his guitar playing in there, and it's it's goofy and fun
And you're a fan of
out.
Gary Sharon?
Well, he was okay, but I was more about the guitar
Mhm.
wizardry there of Nuno. Betancourt. I forget how to say
Yep.
his name, but that's
Live, they're phenomenal, or were back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 9 is Sacrifice with Soldiers of Misfortune.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Thrash
Yeah.
band.
Yeah, out of Toronto. Yeah.
Number 8, I got this album, Megadeth, Rest in Peace. Number 7, now this might not be also a popular opinion because I know a lot of people don't like this album, but I like this album, and that's Iron Maiden's No Prayer for the Dying.
Boo.
I haven't heard that album in fucking years. I
Same,
even
but the
forgot it
last time
existed.
last time I heard it was awful. So yeah.
What do you
Well,
like about it? Like, tell us.
Well, see, when I was going through all the releases, there wasn't very many. There wasn't many for me to choose from because I don't
But
know.
is it an album you've listened to? Like, do you continue to listen to it?
I have once in a while, yes.
Yeah. It's
I
got
don't know,
cool
I
cover art.
Like, see, because I don't like Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. I don't like
Oh
Summer in
God.
Time. So I
End the
like this.
podcast right now.
Who likes Seventh Son, Jason? Okay, never mind.
I've got it tattooed on my arm. That's another one. My dad and I got that album my 16th birthday. We went and got matching tattoos, which was the cover art of Seventh Son.
Well, that's another thing. When it came out, I liked it. I went and saw that tour and stuff, but it just didn't have staying power for me.
With
Seventh
Anthrax
Son.
opening, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, where am I? Number 6, I got Trouble with their 4th album, which was called Trouble, the doom metal band from Chicago, I believe. Number 5, I got another Canadian band in here with Annihilator. Well, one member is Canadian, I guess. Anyway, with Never Never Land. Number 4, I have Judas Priest with Painkiller. Number 3 is Slayer and Seasons in the Abyss. Number 2, I got Pantera and Cowboys from Hell. And my number 1 is Suicidal Tendencies, Lights, Camera, Revolution.
Number 1, eh? Wow.
Yes, I love Suicidal Tendencies.
I think that was Jim's favorite one of his favorites on an earlier podcast when we did this.
Oh,
We
okay.
might have done another 1990 album, and I believe he placed it number 1. But yeah, good album.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Jason, let's hear your 10 list.
All right, at number 10, Sanctuary, Into the Mirror Black. Now, this is when I fell in love with Warrell Dane. I think this is Sanctuary's best album. We were in the car yesterday driving to Toronto and put the album on, and I couldn't remember what my favorite songs were, but I'm gonna have to go back to it again because I haven't listened to it. But I do know that it is one of my favorite Sanctuary albums, and that album happened to come out in 1990, so it's at number 10. Number 9 is Forbidden, Twisted into Form. I think it's Forbidden's best album. I think it's one of the best thrash albums of all time. Yeah, number 8, Prong, Beg to Differ. For crossover thrash, it's the best album, even better than anything DRI has done, in my opinion. It's not on quite the same as DRI, but there is a crossover aspect to this album, and I fucking love that album. I love the cover art. I love everything about that album. I love the brand new Prong album, which to me is the best they've done since Beg to Differ. Number 8, I have Anthrax, Persistence of Time. Not my favorite Anthrax album, but probably my second favorite. It's their darkest album. I could do without the cover of that on that album. I got the money. What's the cover song on that one? I can't remember. It's terrible. Whatever that cover song is on there. I think it's the second song, but yeah, easily their darkest album and probably most technical. Where are we at? 10, 9, 8, 7. Number 6, Napalm Death, Harmony Corruption. One of the best death metal albums of all time. It's when I know that that Napalm would not say the same. They don't really like that they went into a death metal realm, but I prefer this album over any of the earlier stuff, any of their grindcore stuff. I think it's just a really, really solid old school death metal album. Number 5, Entomb, Left Hand Path. What else can you say? Swedish death metal at its best. Number 4, Slayer, Season of the Abyss. I probably would have rated this higher in 1990. Probably would have been my number 1 album of 1990. But yeah, an awesome album. It's when I picked up guitar. I remember buying the tab book to this and spent an entire summer learning almost every single song apart from the leads. So I have a fondness for that album for that reason. Number 3, Obituary's Cause of Death. One of the first death metal albums I ever listened to. I think it's still one of their best albums. And my top 3 are dominated by death metal. So number 2, Death's Spiritual Healing. Again, Death's greatest album of all time. Perhaps the greatest death metal album of all time. I'm saying about all these albums that came out in 90. But Spiritual Healing, I can't get enough of that album even to this day. It's just perfection. And number 1 would be Deicide's self-titled album. What can you say? It's again the greatest death metal album of all time. This one for sure, the greatest.
See, when I was looking at the list, I saw those 3 bands are ones that I saw, and I thought Jason will probably have those on his list.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And the Prong one too. I saw that one and thought he might have that one too.
Yep. You were right.
Curtis, are you ready yet?
Yeah, I think I cobbled together a top 10, and this is not in any particular order, though, just because I misunderstood what we were doing. So I took a look through Wikipedia for what was released in 1990, and these 10 stood out to me as being the best. So I got Empire by Queensryche. Again, this is not in any particular order, so this is number 1. It's not number 10. Then we got Against the Law by Stryper, hair metal band, but whatever, they kind of changed their sound on this one, and it's not my favorite Stryper album, but it is better than the one that came before it. Next up, Cause of Death by Obituary. I don't think Jason had that on his list. Did I miss that?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, it was number 3.
Okay, I missed that one then. Okay. Rust in Peace, obviously, I got on there. Once Dead by Vengeance Rising, a very good Christian thrash band. Not as good as their previous album, but still pretty good.
That's a great album. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
It's very good. Not as good as Human Sacrifice, but pretty good. And they got a very interesting history with the singer being a born-again preacher and now turning into a Satanist/atheist.
What?
You don't know this history?
No, I don't. I'm gonna have to research that because that's interesting.
Yeah, Roger Martinez went from being a hardcore Christian preacher and disseminator of Christianity to being a Satanist and slash atheist.
Yeah, I knew that about the band because they were. I didn't listen to a lot of Christian metal at the time, but there were
Yeah,
bands like Believer. They
yeah.
were one. Um,
I got Believer on my list.
oh, nice. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Continue with your list then.
yeah. Okay, where was I? Vengeance we were just talking about, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Vengeance. Okay, great. So I also have Pornography on my list too. That is an extremely good album. The concept's pretty cool. It's got some weird songs on it. Get the Funk Out is kind of stupid, but other than that, live they were quite good. But Get the Funk Out was pretty stupid. More Than Words, was that on this one? No,
I don't think so. No.
that was on Three Sides to Every Story.
Yeah,
So never
yeah.
mind More Than Words. I will not talk about that. But otherwise, they were pretty good live. I saw them open for Bryan Adams of all people in Asuyas, BC back in 92, 91. They were opening for Bryan Adams on the Wake Up the Neighbors tour. Interesting bill. Steve Miller was also on that. I don't know. I guess they wanted to be diverse or something, but
Was
they were
that a
good live.
festival or?
No, it was
No?
Bryan Adams was just playing all these dates in BC, and he packaged up Extreme and Steve Miller, and I think there was like Grapes of Wrath, if I'm not mistaken. It was like a
Interesting.
weird bill.
Yeah.
I know. I don't know what he was thinking, but it worked, I guess. Okay, yeah, we were talking about Extreme. So next up, I have the Deicide self-titled too. I think this is their best album, period.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I agree about it being number one from 1990, but it's a pretty damn good album for sure. I might prefer Cause of Death slightly, but don't quote me on that. Depends on the day. Next up, got another Christian metal album, Weapons of Our Warfare by Deliverance, and they are kind of like a cross between Queensryche and probably Metallica, I would say, early Metallica. Anyway, it's a good album. Next up, I have Faith, Hope, Love by King's X, which is not my favorite King's X album by any stretch of the imagination, but I do like the band. And then Sanity Obscure by Believer, which I think is an extremely underrated album. Not a lot of people talk about it, both just period. I think that's an album that's an underrated gem that most people have not even heard of. But yeah, there's my top 10.
I agree with that. That Believer album was right up there.
It is.
I think,
And the follow-up's great too.
Yeah, what do you remember what the follow-up was? I can't recall.
Dimensions. It was
Yes,
weird as
yeah.
fuck.
Yeah,
it was
Yeah,
way
it
ahead
was
of its time.
quite experimental. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was interesting because now people probably figured it out. I'm not much into death metal. That's why I didn't have any on my list. But
Well,
I
you
knew-
haven't. You're open-minded though, right? You're gonna go check out our picks.
Yeah, I'll check them all out.
Okay. Yeah. Check out the
am.
Believer because that, as Curtis mentioned, I think that's one that a lot of people haven't heard of,
Yeah.
and it definitely.
And what are they? Sorry, their style. What is it?
Thrash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With touches of death.
Yeah.
I'm
touches of
vaguely remembering that name. I'll have to look through my CDs and make sure I don't have it, and I just forget because I have so many.
You might.
It's-
You might.
It's one of the best thrash albums of 90, I would say. Just looking at that list, I mean, other than Rust in Peace, I mean, there wasn't, anything notable that I really saw other than that album.
No,
And I just realized that Rest in Peace didn't even make my top 10. So
no, that's
It
It
right.
made
so.
neither of your guys' top 10, and I almost didn't
No,
put it because we were
I
discussing.
put it as my number 8 just because.
oh, did you? Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so that was a good episode. Does anybody want to say anything to finish about Megadeth or anything?
I'm happy just to say that I think that they kind of lost their way after Rust in Peace to like most of the rest of the 90s. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how you guys felt about it. Euthanasia, I thought, was an okay album. Risk wasn't very good at all. What was the name of the album with the dude with what was the name of the album that came out in 2001? Do you remember, Jason? That was the next good album.
World something. Oh yeah, it's got
The world,
Big Rattlehead.
world needs a hero.
That's
Yeah,
the one. They
yeah.
didn't do another good album, really, in my opinion, until The World Needs a Hero, and that wasn't even a stellar album. Then they kind of lost their way again with System Has Failed, but then they had that 2-album run, United Abominations and Endgame, that were just phenomenal. And Like, if you haven't listened to those two albums, you should really go listen to those two, and then the newest one as well.
Okay.
All three of them are classics. I would say that they rank up with the best of their earlier material. So, like, anyone that kind of like gave up on Megadeth after Risk or after Countdown, I think you should go back, listen to those three albums specifically. That's my wrap up.
Okay. And Jason, you have any final thoughts?
I would just say, I think my love for Megadeth that I had back in the day has has dwindled quite a bit, and I think I know what it is. You know, I was trying to, apart from So Far So Good So What, which I think is an incredible album and always will be, but I think it really just comes down to Mustaine's vocals. I don't know if I always loved them or always hated them, and it's always been a contention with me. And I think as I grow older, I become less and less fond of them. So I think, I don't know. I think it's the one thing that holds me back from being a Megadeth lover over Metallica. So there's a question: Metallica or Megadeth? I'm gonna have to go with Metallica.
I'll go with Megadeth any day of the week.
Yeah, and Blake.
Yeah, I think they have more consistent albums over the last 30 years than Metallica. Like,
I
even
think
the crap
with
Megadeth.
consistency, for sure. You're
Yeah.
right on that point. Yeah.
Yeah, like even the crap Megadeth albums, I think are better than the crap Metallica. Like, I hate Load, I hate Reload. I don't really care for the Black Album just because I've heard it 2 billion fucking times. But I'll take Countdown over that any day of the week.
Insane
even
Anger,
Euthanasia.
you can just throw that one in the.
Yeah, and like, people are now saying Saint Anger was a good album, was underrated. Like, no, it wasn't. I went and listened to it a few months ago just to check, because I kept seeing people on my feed saying, "Oh, it's a great album." In hindsight, no, it's not. It sucked.
Even if that album was remastered to sound good, to sound like a Metallica album, that still wouldn't
The
fix
songs
things.
suck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, who cares? Like, I mean, yeah, the sound isn't that great, but the songs themselves just are not good.
No.
They are boring. The lyrics suck. The music, it's just boring.
And Blake, Metallica.
Well,
or
I would
Megadeth?
pick Metallica. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Curtis, but
I mean, you guys can be wrong. It's okay, you know.
I've been wrong before. But
And he's right. Consistency, definitely Megadeth wins. But I don't know. The first three Metallica albums, or four, I don't know if Megadeth, in my opinion, can touch those. Maybe. Well, what's So Far So Good So What? Yeah,
I have a controversial opinion that I'm going to say right now.
All right. Go.
Kill 'Em All, not a good album.
Blake, stop podcast. I know Blake's.
Not a good album. Just putting it out there for everybody. Well, okay, no, let me rephrase it. It's not a good album. It's not a classic album.
that's
Interesting.
okay.
See, we got to do Kill 'Em All and get Curtis on for that one. Just to have a descendant.
The
whole time it'll just be like sucks pass. So.
I'm trying to think. Have we done that album yet? I can't remember.
I don't think we have.
The only
No,
good
you did
song
Ride
on
the
is Four
Lightning.
Horsemen, which was Mustaine anyway. So
Yeah, I don't think we
It
have did
was.
that one.
Yeah, you did Ride the Lightning and Master and Justice, right? I think that's
Yes.
it. Yeah.
I'll have to check, but I know Jim, our writer Jim, loves Kill 'Em All, so he's not going to like the end of this podcast.
oh well.
But that's okay. It's just Curtis's opinion.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
The
just
correct
music.
opinion. The
Yeah.
correct opinion.
Okay, well, I should end this thing here. Thanks, Curtis, for joining us here today.
You're very welcome.
And thanks again, Jason. It's nice to have you on again. You've only been on a few. I think this is only our second one. We did Justice for All together.
No, I did
Thought
one
that was a
other.
two-parter, but no, I mean with me,
Oh, with you. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, guys, and thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thank you.